Hey guys, I want to continue on the Is It Good series, and this time we are going to be looking at Russ's e.t.c. If you guys are unfamiliar with Russ, Russ has been a top 3 GM player in North America for several seasons in a row. He's hit top 1 GM, as well as he has been in the top 10 for most seasons. He is a solid player, a tank main, and he normally plays a very selfish playstyle while playing tanks. He'll usually play more of the aggressive do-it-himself, which is great in Storm League, but he actually plays a pretty good competitive game when he's working with his team. He does play more towards the team, which means that he is just a consistent and an adapting player. Today we're going to be looking at his e.t.c. Now, if you're curious about the Is It Good series, the idea of this is to look at highly competitive games to determine if their builds are good, if their playstyles are good, and kind of go from there. Naturally, these players are going to be the top of their divisions, or at least the top of this competitive, or I wouldn't even make the video because I'm not here to just trash them. There have been times that I've thought that the build was not good and the playstyle was, or the playstyle might have been better, but the build was good. Either way, we're going to be looking at e.t.c. So, he starts off and his job is pretty much just to double soak. Excuse me. He's just double soaking for his team, trying to keep them in. He tells his team where to go as far as what camps to do. They're also in comms, so there's a lot more that could go into this. He picks e.t.c. into Garrosh, and e.t.c. has some pros and cons into Garrosh. One pro is that you can press your E before being thrown by Garrosh, and then you can knock Garrosh into your team, slide through them, and give your team an opportunity to kill Garrosh. You usually have a better opportunity to kill Garrosh because when you W to knock Garrosh forward, you're Wing to knock the enemy team away, giving you a lot of space and a lot of time to kill Garrosh. It is a pretty good pick. The downside is that as the game gets a little bit later, if Garrosh lands a throw, he can actually taunt you before you get anything else done, and his team can kill you before that taunt ends, which means that there are certainly pros and cons about it. But the early half of the game, Russ is focusing primarily on wave clear. He does go block party this game. I've got a lot of rules about block party in Prog Rock, but in general, you want to be taking Prog Rock against a lot of poke, block party against a lot of auto attacks, and if there's no real priority between one or the other, you'll generally take Prog Rock. You also avoid taking block party if they have very fast auto attackers, or you'll try to avoid Prog Rock if they're a little bit burstier. But either way, that's the general idea of going these two different talents. He's going against Hanzo, going auto attack build, so he did go block party, and it's definitely a good choice because that auto attack Hanzo, we saw a video of Mockery playing that auto attack Hanzo and dominating. So now he's in a really, really good spot to deal with that. He's still constantly just covering soak almost this entire game. He's just been covering soak for his team, and once again he just pinged top as he's covering bottom lane soak. He pinged top for his team to do that. That means that they're going to be giving up this first objective, and once again he repositions to throw a W, getting the minions a little bit closer so they could die to these structures. Level 4, he goes with loudspeakers, and loudspeakers are again, it's just a meta option for e.t.c. Allows e.t.c. to push everyone away, not needing to worry too much about it. It's one of the best peeling tools for e.t.c. is picking up loudspeakers. Russ isn't against picking some other talents outside the meta, though. We've seen him take speed metal as well on e.t.c. I don't really like speed metal as a tank because loudspeakers is so good at peeling people away and keeping your team alive while saving your Q to still be available to punish mistakes. So that's my personal thought on that. I do think speed metal in the solo lane is pretty good, though, because you can jump in on their backline, get a ton of movement speed, and just bully their backline. At this level, there are a lot of options to go. He likes to go hammer on. I think Pinball Wizard's my favorite just because it covers the wave clear for your team, and it also has the potential of burst. If you catch someone out of position, you could actually kill a Hanzo from about 40% health without him getting any time to react. So that's why I like Pinball Wizard. It just has a ton of burst potential. But if you're playing it with your team correctly, you should almost never get value out of Pinball Wizard in team fights because you should be sliding and body blocking so that your team gets more time to land their abilities rather than you getting your abilities off. So that's the only thing that I would mention about Pinball Wizard. is that it's great in solo queue. It gets worse in competitive, but even in competitive, it still was the major pick in HGC. I do think Hammer-On's pretty cool, though, and it's something that Russ does a little different. And that's what we're here to do, is we're here to break down these builds and see what they're doing to make it a little different, and what, if it's working, if it's not working. In this particular case, though, we haven't seen too much value come out from Hammer-On. If you're unfamiliar with what Hammer-On does, you pop any ability, and for the next 2 auto attacks, you will do 40% more damage. It's really great if you're just trying to slowly whittle down people. You slide through, get 2 auto attacks, you use your E, you get 2 auto attacks, and then you might even be able to get a W against a wall and get 2 more auto attacks. So we see them diving into the back line. He helps out with that, and then he ends up just walking away. His team grabs that curse, or that tribute anyways, and they walk away. He doesn't do too much. They do a 1-for-1 trade, but they end up with the tribute as well, so definitely a favorable trade. As we start getting to level 10, Russ usually runs Mosh Pit, even against teams that have a lot of CC, and that's kind of my go-to as well, because for me, the real ultimate on e.t.c. is your Q. Your other ultimates are just there to answer some other few things, and if you don't answer a lot with Stage Dive, then Mosh does 2 major things, even against a team with a lot of CC. Mosh will make it to where you can prevent the enemy from using a lot of their CC because they're waiting for Mosh, or if you get that dream scenario where they use a few too many CCs, you slide and you just automatically win the team fight, which is great. You can also do solo Moshes. If you ever catch someone that's out of position, you could just go for a quick solo Mosh, giving your team time to kill even the tankiest people, and then they won't have those people for the next team fight. And even down an ultimate, having a tank dead or a healer dead for an objective is worth more than an ultimate in many cases. So, level 10, he takes a couple seconds to determine what he's going to go. Even after seeing everyone pick the CC, he's still thinking about it, but he does end up going with Mosh Pit. And overall, he's just sitting in a position. And I actually want to talk about this playstyle a little bit. What you're going to see is whenever Garrosh throws out a Q, you see him immediately stand right next to people like this. And that's his way of making sure that his team never gets thrown by the Garrosh. Garrosh is a great counter pick to certain tanks. And this is one of the reasons why tanks like Blaze and Arthas are not very meta, is because they could be thrown and they have no escape. But if you throw e.t.c, he slides right through and he's perfectly fine. And that's the challenge about it, is like e.t.c can deal with that, but in order to deal with that, you need to position really well. So that's exactly what he's going to do again. He's going to position. He first wants to get some vision. He sees where they are, and then he wants to position in a spot where his team won't end up dying. He doesn't work too hard about landing really good moshes. He's focused more on keeping his team alive for the longer portion of a fight, and then kind of going from there. This particular fight, he shot calls to his team. He wants to make sure that they're spread out for when the Hanzo arrow comes out. And then he tells Deathwing to hop in the air so that Deathwing can join him in this fight. And so this is how this fight goes. He takes a lot of damage in the beginning, and he's just trying to keep that armor going. The block charges are getting burned. He gets thrown, but still nothing too much has happened through there. He takes a ton of damage, gets taunted. A Ruby goes out, dropping a lot. So all he needs to do is survive long enough to power slide into these potions. And this amazing drop-in from Turk blocks a lot of the damage that's aimed at him. He slides over, gains his full health bar back, and then he goes back, getting 2 strikes with Hammer On, doing a mosh pit, just standing there, and that mosh pit leads to his team taking this entire fight. His playstyle was rather risky, but it did certainly pay off. He then shot calls to his team and goes for bosses. I think the big power of Russ is in his shot calling. If you ever are playing with Russ and he does hop in voice comms, I do recommend hopping in voice comms as well, because Russ's ability to tell his team when to go for bosses and when to avoid these specific tributes, like whenever someone dies, he always just tells his team to go to a different lane because it's just not worth it. But whenever his team's available, he's always shot calling really well, and he's always making sure that his team goes where they need to go. So definitely his power is in his shot calling. His mechanics are not bad though. His build, I mean, I'm still trying to see the value of Hammer On. I'm watching these fights. I haven't seen any particular kills that have been secured with Hammer On. I haven't seen any particular kills missed by not taking Pinball Wizard either, though. So far, we haven't seen anything major. There is a bit of wave clear, though, that he might be missing from not going Hammer On, or not by going Pinball Wizard anyways. He takes a lot of damage here, but he did have those block charges. He slides through, just trying to keep his team up, trying his best to not take too much damage. Do you see this in and out playstyle that he's doing? He takes a step back, heals, takes a step forward, takes a step back, heals, takes a step forward. Even though Deathwing does end up dying on his own, his playstyle has allowed his team to get in a good position. Both Hammer-On or Pinball Wizard would have been able to secure that kill, but at the same time, either way, if he's not using Pinball Wizard for wave clear, then Hammer On probably is better if you're playing correctly, right? Like I said, if you're playing perfectly in a coordinated team, Pinball Wizard should get almost no value in team fights, where Hammer On should almost always get value in team fights because you're going to slide, get 2 auto attacks before the stun is over. So I would say Hammer On, if you don't need the wave clear from Pinball, I do think Hammer On is pretty good. So their team ends up playing it a little bit safer here. They don't go too much into it. He ends up taking Mic Check. Again, Mic Check combined with loudspeakers is one of the best peeling tools in this entire game, allowing you to peel off multiple times against the enemy because it will shave off 6 seconds of the cooldown, lowering it down to a 4-second cooldown. You don't just need to hit what's it called? You don't need to hit 2 heroes. It's just 2 something. It says hitting at least 2 targets. It's not even minions, mercs. You can hit literally any 2 targets that you're allowed to do damage to. That means it could be like a Treant that's summoned by Malfurion. It could be a minion. It could be even just a sidewall in one person. And so this cooldown is almost always going to be 4 seconds as long as there's a fight going on, which makes it, again, the best peeling tool in this game. I would say the only thing that's like arguably better is like maybe an Emerald Wind, but again, that only interrupts the first time. This has such a low cooldown that it's just worth it. At level 16, ultimately these talents are not as big of power spikes as a lot of other level 16 talent tiers. If you are going to get a lot of moshes where you're only going to be hitting like 1 or 2 people and you're expecting it to go for a long time, Showstopper gives you an extra 10 armor, which is really nice, and it makes that armor go a little bit longer because your Rockstar only lasts 2 seconds while Showstopper is going to last 4, so you're going to have a lot more armor over a longer portion of the fight. So if you're moshing a lot, this is great. If you're not moshing a lot, aggressive shredding's nice because you're likely to always get 2 auto attacks off after you get a slide, meaning that you're going to shave off a 1.5 seconds. Plus, this also reduces the cooldown on minions, walls, or anything else that you might be auto attacking. Finally, Imposing Presence is really good if you're ever going against like an auto attack heavy team because you can lower their attack speed by 50% if they're close to you, or if they're far away auto attacking you, you lower it by 20%. All of these talents are okay, but I don't think any of these talents are really great. He decides to go with Imposing Presence, and again, he's playing safe. He's not going for slides just because they're available. He stands right next to Garrosh in case Garrosh decides to go for the slide, or go for the throw, and Garrosh ends up getting low enough that he goes for the slide and takes him out. We have that extra fear go off. He knocks him away, but overall, he's going to probably just go in for a mosh right here. Lands a 1-person mosh. Doesn't get interrupted, but he ends up doing, pretty much closes out the game because of the play against the Garrosh and the play against the Malfurion. They no longer have a healer or a tank, and allows his team to pretty much just clear out this game. Russ's e.t.c. is the build good. I do like the flavor of switching to Hammer On. If you're in a coordinated environment that you won't get value off of Pinball Wizard, they're covering the wave clear for you, they're covering the camp clear for you, and when you slide, you're going to get more value on Hammer On than you will from Pinball Wizard in most scenarios. So I like that tech pick. I think that's a good one. Going for Imposing Presence instead of shredding against this team is perfectly fine. And then finally, he goes with a bunch of different options. He doesn't pick anything here, so I'm just going to tell you guys what my rule is if you're going Mosh. If the enemies are heavy backline, you go Bolt. If the enemies are heavy frontline, you go death metal. And if the enemies have very little CC, you go Torbus. And the reasons for these options is if the enemies don't have a lot of CC, you can go in and you can mosh their front line while your team does some damage. And when their back line comes up to try to DPS you, then you go and slide on them, and now you've moshed their back line. You can pretty much mosh their entire team without having any issues. Bolt of the Storm against heavy backline means that you are going to bolt past their front line and you're going to slide in and mosh their backline. Then their front line has a few choices. If they start running away, they're probably going to run right into your mosh. And if they try to go and interrupt it, well, then your team gets a lot of time to kill their front line and likely lead to their kills in their back line. And a lot of times, I'd pick Bolt if the enemy front line does not have any interrupts, or they only have like one interrupt. Say Garrosh, for example. Early game, he only has one interrupt. Or if he doesn't take the talent on level 16, he only has one interrupt for Mosh, which means if he uses his Q a little too early, you could bolt right past him, slide in their backline, and guess what? There's no interrupts in their front line, so you can mosh all of their backline and have no issues, which is the power of Bolt. Death metal. If they have 3 or 4 frontliners, the only way that they kill you is with their frontline, and then you end up with an uninterruptible mosh hitting their entire frontline, which is really powerful. And then finally, if they have no CC, I mean, this is a 6-second mosh pit that you can move around to make sure that you hit more people. It's very powerful. So that's my rule of thumb. I may need to talk to Russ a little bit to talk about to ask him what his is. But as far as his build, yeah, I think it's pretty good. It's very close to the meta build, with only one real exception is Hammer On. I can see the reason that he goes it, so I'm going to say his build is good. As far as solo queue, I still recommend Pinball. It's got more wave clear. But if you're coordinating with a team that can cover that, especially with something like a Jaina where you definitely don't want to be pushing them away after you slide, you want to slide and let all of Jaina's damage hit, then Hammer On's really, really cool. So I like this tech. Is Russ's playstyle good? Yeah, I mean, Garrosh never landed a throw anywhere near e.t.c. because e.t.c. was always making sure to eat the throws for his team, and his value during these fights was immeasurable. So this is the greatest part about that. So yes, Russ played a good e.t.c. and the build is good. I do think it's a good build to run with a team that's got just a teeny bit of coordination. So thank you guys for watching. Feel free to check out any of my other videos, especially any other videos in the Is It Good series, as well as this game was taken from CCL, which is a community clash league ran by Heroes Hearth. I am one of the casters for that. So you can check that out on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time and 9 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to check those out. You'll get to see me casting some of these awesome games. We've got yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, so make sure to check that out. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.